Alice Roosevelt was one supremely mischievous girl, especially for a president's daughter. One of the most stunning women and liveliest socialites of her era, Alice lit up newspapers worldwide with her antics, driving her father, Theodore Roosevelt, to distraction. But it wasn't all harmless fun. When Alice was forced to leave the White House after William Taft's election, she left a disturbing farewell gift for the new First Lady. If you're wondering why Alice Roosevelt became such a wild child, look no further than the moment of her birth. Though she was the daughter of future President Theodore Roosevelt and his wife, banking heiress Alice Lee Roosevelt, the little baby faced immediate tragedy. Just 2 days after her birth on Valentine's Day, 1884, Alice's young mother died in the prime of her youth, succumbing to kidney failure that no one had even suspected. No sooner had she taken her first breaths than Alice seemed marked by doom, and things only got worse. As if losing her mother hours after birth wasn't enough, Alice's father dealt her a heartbreaking blow. He had deeply loved his young, beautiful wife, and now couldn't bear to be in his daughter's presence after the tragedy. He fled to his remote North Dakota ranch, sending Alice to live with her Aunt Anna for years. A dead mother, an absent father, and a heap of repressed emotions. What could possibly go wrong? Answer: everything. When she was just 2, Alice's father remarried, this time to his old high school sweetheart, the poised and proper Edith Kermit Caro. As Alice grew, she blossomed into a striking young beauty who looked remarkably like her late mother. Her new stepmother, Edith, did not take kindly to this, and made sure Alice knew it. Edith once sniped that if Alice's mother hadn't died young, she would have bored Theodore to death. When young Alice faced this cruel jab, she struck back with a vengeance. When Theodore, then governor of New York, and her stepmother insisted she attend a girls' school in New York City, Alice fired back with a scathing letter. She wrote, "If you send me, I will humiliate you. I will do something to shame you. I tell you, I will." As time passed, Alice's charm wore thin, even with her indulgent father, and she began to feel he favored her younger half-siblings, with Edith over her. But this didn't tame her behavior. Perhaps in rebellion, she grew even more defiant and wild, taking up habits like running the streets unchecked with every boy in town. Or so her stepmother believed. She gained notoriety for smoking, drinking, gambling, and staying out far too late with gentlemen callers. In 1901, when Alice's father, Theodore, was Vice President of the United States, a national tragedy shook Washington's core. President William McKinley was assassinated. Suddenly, Roosevelt became acting president, and the teenage Alice, just 17, became the first daughter. Her reaction was, well, rather chilling. Despite the grim circumstances, she reportedly received the news with sheer delight, and it only escalated from there. In 1902, Alice officially debuted as a debutante. She was an instant sensation. That evening she chose a slightly unconventional pale blue gown instead of the traditional white, sparking a fashion trend in the process. Admirers dubbed the icy hue Alice Blue, and women across America began wearing it. But behind her picture-perfect appearance at these events, Alice was already showing troubling tendencies. While she was a delight in her best moods, she had a terrifying mean streak. At one point, bored at a White House gathering, she decided to tamper with a dignified middle-aged man's chair, then watched as he sat down and sprang up like a shot from a cannon while she played innocent nearby. Very amusing, Alice. But when it came to family members, instead of strangers, she could go from mean to downright unbearable. One day, this led to an infamous clash. On this particular day, Alice must have been feeling bold, because she interrupted her father no fewer than 3 times while he tried to converse with his friend, writer Owen Wister. Finally, the president snapped. Pushed to his limit, He threatened to throw Alice out the window unless she left him alone, then famously huffed to Wister, "I can either run the country or I can attend to Alice, but I cannot possibly do both." How prophetic those words would prove. In 1905, Alice joined a group of congressmen on a diplomatic cruise to Japan, China, and other destinations. But one evening, things turned from stately to scandalous. Bored, as usual, with the serious crowd, Alice dove into the ship's pool fully clothed, dragging a reluctant congressman with her. This stunt caused an immediate uproar. Alice's response? She simply remarked that it would have been even more scandalous if she had done it without her clothes. Still, even with all this late-night pool jumping, that wasn't the most outrageous thing to happen on that ship. While sailing the world relatively unsupervised, the vivacious Alice grew particularly friendly with one congressman, Nicholas Longworth III, a serious Republican with a hangdog face and a playboy reputation. Longworth was 14 years older than Alice and, oddly, bore a striking resemblance to her father, Theodore Roosevelt. For reasons that might fascinate Freud, Alice found Longworth irresistible and admitted she was more or less in love with him. If that sounds unstable, well, Alice began making some very shaky decisions from then on. By the time the diplomatic ship docked back in the United States, Alice had news that set the rumor mill ablaze. She was engaged to Nicholas Longworth, perhaps the unlikeliest groom among her many suitors, despite his political credentials. Still, Alice threw herself into wedding planning with her signature gusto, and she did not disappoint. This Roosevelt wedding was set to be the social event of the season, no matter what. And the socialite ensured all eyes were on her. Not only did she wear a light blue wedding dress, a nod to her famed Alice Blue, she also cut her massive, gorgeous wedding cake with a sword borrowed from a military aide during the reception. For the first years of her marriage, Alice and Longworth got along famously, but the ties binding them were already fraying. In 1912, Alice dealt Longworth a devastating betrayal. She publicly opposed his run for election. Longworth lost, and when he did, Alice proudly boasted that she was the reason. For some couples, this love-hate dynamic might spice things up. For Alice and Longworth, though, it created a gaping rift, one that widened with Alice's next move. Exactly when Alice's eyes began to wander is hard to pinpoint, but she undeniably carried on multiple affairs behind Longworth's back, or worse, right in front of him. One of her most prominent and enduring affairs was with Senator William Borah, a man who, like Longworth, was decades older than her, but, according to Alice, far more thrilling in the bedroom. Around 1925, Alice received shocking news. After more than a decade in her childless marriage to Longworth, she was pregnant. Washington insiders suspected that Borah, whose own marriage was also childless, was the father. And when the child was born, Alice took it to another level. Fun-loving and sharp, Alice Roosevelt's humor was often described as brilliantly malicious, and she saved her cruelest jab for her cuckolded husband. Though she named her baby girl Paulina, she once quipped that she initially wanted to name her Deborah, as in Deborah. Ouch. As it was, those in the know nicknamed the girl Aurora Bora Alice. Double ouch. Still, Alice was just getting started. Truth be told, Alice was as poor a mother to Paulina as she had been a faithful wife to Longworth. Caught up in her dazzling world of social events, Alice had little time to raise Paulina, and they never formed a close bond, even in adulthood. As we'll soon see, this would come back to haunt her. In the 1940s, Alice became a grandmother when her daughter Paulina married American artist and author Alexander McCormick Sturm, and had a child, Joanna, with him. It seemed the great American Golden family was back in its glory. Yet, as with so much in Alice's life, appearances were deceiving. In reality, she was about to face a dark crisis. In 1951, When baby Joanna was still a young girl, Alexander Sturm died suddenly of hepatitis, leaving Paulina grieving and Alice struggling to hold her family together. In 1957, Paulina passed away from an overdose of sleeping pills, leaving young Joanna in Alice's care. Whether driven by guilt for her earlier neglect or a newfound maturity, Alice treated Joanna almost the opposite of how she had treated her own daughter. She doted on and spoiled the young girl, and the two became inseparable. As one friend put it, Alice has been a wonderful father and mother to Joanna. Of course, this didn't mean Alice was losing her edge. In fact, some powerful men soon discovered she was sharpening it. As Princess Alice aged, she practically became the Dowager Empress of America, wielding tremendous political power. When Thomas Dewey ran for president, Alice ensured he would fade into obscurity. By unfavorably comparing his looks to the bridegroom on a wedding cake, she nearly single-handedly cost him 2 presidential elections in a row. One of Alice's most famous friends was then Vice President Richard Nixon. Not only did Nixon serve as a pallbearer at her daughter Paulina's tragic funeral, but Alice also tirelessly supported his political career, inviting him to all the right parties until he became president. Yet, instead of gratitude, Alice faced betrayal. In the 1970s, the Watergate scandal tarnished Nixon's name forever. During his resignation, the disgraced Nixon quoted from one of Alice's published diary entries, specifically one recalling her father's grief over her late mother, where she wrote, "Only if you've been to the lowest valley can you know how great it is to be on the highest mountaintop." Never one to miss a beat, Alice watched Nixon's resignation on television. When she heard her now former friend use her words to justify his shady actions, she flew into a rage. With her classic gusto, she reportedly unleashed a string of curses at the screen and denounced him as her friend. Eventually, all good things come to an end, and though Alice's troubled marriage somehow endured, her father, Theodore's presidency, did not. In 1909, he left the White House to make way for the 27th president, William Taft. But after years as first daughter, Alice was not thrilled to relinquish her privileges and made sure the new occupants knew it in a chilling way. As she left the White House with her father, Alice left a disturbing goodbye gift. She had crafted a voodoo doll resembling the incoming First Lady, Nellie Taft, and upon her departure, Alice burned the eerie doll in the White House's front yard. Unsurprisingly, Alice never quite got along with the Tafts, and they later banned her from the White House. In the end, Alice outlived all her younger siblings and many giants of American history, whom she had met and even influenced. Still, even she couldn't live forever. On February 20th, 1980, she passed away in her Embassy Row home in Washington, D.C., the cherry on top. She lived just 8 days past her 96th birthday, an overachiever to the